Okay, so originally I didn't know if I wanted to make a video about this. I feel like other people have kind of already like they've already made videos about this. They've already given their thoughts on it, but I figured, what, why not? Maybe there are people who are actually interested to hear on my what my opinions on this are. So, what exactly are we going to be discussing today? Well, we're apparently going to be talking about the this whole situation over Lucasfilm, or behind the scenes of Lucasfilm. So, in case you don't know, but if you've been a part of the Star Wars fandom lately, or if you've been following it, then you'll know that lately one of the discussions that a lot of fans have been having lately is that apparently there's a civil war going on behind the doors of Lucasfilm. You've got on one side you've got Favreau and Filoni, and you've got their followers, and on the other side you've got Kathleen Kennedy and her followers. With Kathleen Kennedy's side, they want to keep doing what they've been doing with Star Wars, where they just want to push their messages, and they don't really care about storytelling. They don't care about the characters. They don't care about respecting the characters that came before them. Instead, in some cases, they just want to outright pretend they don't even exist, and just introduce their own characters and not even bother to develop them at all, and just leave them these completely one-dimensional, one-note, bland, boring nothings, and just expect us to like them. And anytime someone even criticizes them remotely, they just come out and just call you whatever name under the sun that they can, because they can't argue against you, because they know you're right. They know you're right, but they can't come up with any argument against you, so they just call you whatever name they can in order to try and shift the blame on you, so that people will, people on the outside look at the situation and say, oh, the other person's just being, must be what they say they are. But then when they actually look at what the other side's been criticizing, they will figure out, oh yeah, they're right. Yeah, they've been right the entire time. And then of course you've got the Favreau and Filoni side, where they actually want to treat the characters with respect. We saw that with the Mandalorian, and where at the ending of season 2 we saw the return of Luke Skywalker, and everyone lost their collective shit. You can find every single reaction you can on this platform, where you've got people pretty much openly bawling their eyes out when they saw Luke Skywalker come back. The real Luke Skywalker, the one we saw, the one we haven't seen since 1983 in Return of the Jedi. Now, a lot of people, again, have been speculating as to whether or not there is indeed a civil war or not. Me personally, I've always thought that, I don't think it's as cut and dry as whether or not there is or isn't. I think that there are people on both sides who kind of take it too far. There are people on one side who say, yes, there is indeed a civil war at Lucasfilm. There's a line drawn, in the sand, and they say you're either on this side or you're either on that side. But then I see people on the other side who just outright dismiss any of these claims, and say, no, there is no civil war at Lucasfilm. Everything is fine. Everything's kosher. Everything's just beautiful. Everything's blending together beautifully. It's just, let's face it, we know that's not the case. Okay, we know that's not the case, because that's never the case in any company that you work in. I'm sure if you were to ask anyone who happens to work at any company, no matter what it is, I'm sure they'll tell you that the people in that company all probably have their own idea as to whether or not they actually agree with the direction that the company is going. Like, that's just going to be the case with anything. So yes, I don't think that everything is all cut and dry. I don't think everything's clean. I don't think there is a straight up just cut and dry civil war at Lucasfilm. I think it's somewhere in the middle. But we're going to take a look at this post right here. Now, before we get into it, I do have to warn you, this post is a little bit long, so that's going to make this video just a little bit longer. Sorry about that. It's going to make this video a little bit longer than usual. So just to give you guys a bit of a warning right now, this video could be a long one, because the post in itself is pretty damn long. So this was posted by WDW Pro, whom, if I remember correctly, has posted some pretty credible information in the past. Now, from what I know, WDW Pro themselves I don't know if they themselves work at Lucasfilm, or if they have people working in Lucasfilm. And, they received this information from them, and they chose to piece it together to find out, okay, which is real, which is not, and then chose to post it right here. I don't know what it is, but we're about to take a look at this post. And I've taken a look at some of it, and it does seem to corroborate what a lot of people have been saying. about whether or not there is a bit of a divide. Let's call it. Let's not call it a civil war. Let's say there's a divide in Lucasfilm as to where they think the direction of Star Wars should go. So let's go ahead and take a look at this actual post, and let's go ahead and read it. Okay, so like I said, this is a pretty long post. On October 30, 2012, the Walt Disney Company purchased Lucasfilm from George Lucas for just above $4 billion. Placed in charge of Lucasfilm in George's stead was Kathleen Kennedy. Let's look at what happened next and how that's going today. Specifically, let's talk about whether or not there is a civil war at Lucasfilm and what the divisions really look like. One of the first things that Kathleen Kennedy did after taking charge of the company was hire Kiri Hart to run the Lucasfilm Story Group, which would be in charge of Star Wars narrative moving forward. However, as a matter of how the story group would actually operate, the individuals brought on board for it were actually less interested in Star Wars and more interested in quotas for sex and race for narrative moving forward. This was to such an extent that Kiri Hart's very first action as head of the newly formed story group was to make sure only women were allowed to guide Star Wars. And they go on to state their sources, which is this New York Times article right here. So for anyone who says that this is a claim made by someone who's, oh, they're an anti-SJW or they're against, or they're Finn Menace or whatever, no. This was officially stated right here. You can see the article right here. And this is from the New York Times for all those people who say they'll only believe something if it's from the New York Times or Cinema Blend or whatever other, quote, official news source there is. Jesus Christ, some people. One of the implications of this was that Star Wars gurus at Lucasfilm were kept out of major decisions from 2012 to 2015. Essentially, the development time for the sequel trilogy. Dave Filoni was completely kept out of any significant guidance. Now, I know this is going to piss off a lot of the Filoni fanboys who think that he's like the true heir of Star Wars, the true heir of George Lucas. If this is true, then they are going to be really, really pissed. Although I know that there are a lot of Star Wars enthusiasts, Star Wars fans, especially expanded universe fans, who are not happy with Dave Filoni because he keeps, from what I understand, he keeps changing canon, especially in the Clone Wars series, and I think from what I remember, a little bit of it in Rebels. Instead, writers with no Star Wars background like Carrie Beck and Rain Roberts were brought in to have campfire discussions with Hart about how to bring in female characters to the new Star Wars. Meanwhile, this was pitched to Disney executives as a way to bring girls into buying up Star Wars merchandise. And Disney was also happy to believe that they could double Star Wars toy sales if only little girls would buy those instead of dollies. Okay, let's just stop here right here for a second. This belief in itself is already insane, because girls have always been interested in Star Wars. Okay, yes, Star Wars may have been primarily targeted towards young boys, and again, there's nothing wrong with that if you're someone who listens to that and think, oh, it's being sexist. No. There's nothing wrong with that. There's nothing wrong with a franchise being targeted to a specific demographic and a specific part of that same demographic. For example, if something was mainly targeted towards young boys, does not necessarily mean that girls can't enjoy it too. It just means that they made it with this audience in mind. Just like how there's nothing wrong with a show being primarily aimed towards young girls, okay? There's nothing wrong with this. There's absolutely nothing wrong with it. Just like how there are shows that don't aim for any gender, they aim for just kids, all kids of that age group. It's just that's just smart business. Okay, companies have to know what their audience is so that they can focus their efforts into making products that cater to that specific demographic, because if you try to appeal to everyone, you're going to end up pleasing no one. There's a reason why that saying even exists. So just wanted to comment on that for a little bit. The problem was that not only did Lucasfilm's FemForce want to insert sex, gender, and racial quotas into their new Star Wars products, but they also wanted to discriminate against Caucasian males. Yeah, this I have no problem believing. Despite this being the majority of their consumer demographic, the story group and new Kathleen Kennedy hires wanted nothing to do with the old Star Wars. Hold on, it's fucking annoying. Wanted nothing to do with the old Star Wars. The ridiculous and petty hatred of people groups went as far as to have them drawing a giant red X on Luke Skywalker, their main protagonist and hero of the franchise. And boy, did that work out so well for them, didn't they? In posters at Lucasfilm, Luke represented the patriarchy and male-dominant narratives. Of course, it's the typical talking points. And for that reason, Mr. Skywalker would just have to go. And they even go ahead and post the same tweet where it shows, like, this is behind the scenes of Lucasfilm. And you can see the poster here, and then you can see they zoom in here, and you can see there's a red X over Luke motherfucking Skywalker. These are the people in charge of Lucasfilm, or some of the people in charge of Lucasfilm. This is the attitude they have towards Star Wars. And yet they choose to completely ignore the main hero of the franchise just because of his skin color and because of his gender. The thing that they say that they are against, discrimination against race and gender is wrong, while we discriminate against race and gender. But it's fine because it's a white man, sure. J.J. Abrams was brought in to do The Force Awakens with Lawrence Kasdan assisting and writing. The guidance given to them from Kathleen Kennedy and the story group was simple: make a new hope for a new generation. And that was the biggest problem for a lot of people, including myself. I still remember when I was in the theater and I saw The Force Awakens, and throughout the entire time I was watching the movie, all I could think was, wait a minute, this is just a new hope. Like, this is just a new hope all over again. And I wasn't the only one who saw this. Make his protagonist a woman and make Star Wars look like our world. Oh boy, I could go on a fucking rant just on this statement alone, but I won't because that'll make the video even longer than it already is. Actually, maybe I should just make a video specifically talking about why making a franchise like our world is just wrong and why it inhibits creativity. Maybe, I don't know, we'll see. As Abrams said, and this is a quote from J.J. Abrams, from the beginning of discussions, the notions of a woman at the center of the story was always something that was compelling and exciting to me, and not just at the center. We knew that in addition to Leia, who was a critical piece of this puzzle, we wanted to have other women, not necessarily human, but female characters in the story. There always have been. There always have been in Star Wars. If you would know that, if you just bothered to do your fucking research and actually look into Star Wars, maybe watch the movies, maybe get into the expanded universe. I mean, for God's sakes, Mara Jade is, if you ask a lot of Star Wars fans, I'm sure a lot of them will tell you that Mara Jade is one of their favorite characters. Jaina Solo was one of a lot of fans' favorite characters. There's so many female characters in Star Wars. Aayla Secura, I mean, Jesus Christ. Like, you can know all of this if you just bother to actually do your fucking research. But with teaser trailers, Ahsoka, Ventress, I mean, come on, people. But with teaser trailers for Star Wars leaning heavily on nostalgia and the legacy characters fans loved, The Force Awakens opened to earth-shattering box office results. Despite harming the persona of one of the legacy characters and killing the same characters, fans were excited to find out what would happen to the new female lead, Rey. I don't think there was anyone who was really excited about what would happen with Rey. The minority stormtrooper Finn, and see just how the new baddies came to be. To be fair, many fans pointed out that unless this new galaxy was fleshed out, it seemed odd that the work of the prequel and original trilogy had essentially been undone. Some were also disappointed that Luke, Leia, and Han hadn't been together. Oh, so many people were disappointed by this. But surely they'd get that chance in the next one. Maybe Han would be brought back as a ghost, a vision, a flashback, or something to get the gang back together again. Yeah, we got none of that. Meanwhile, Kennedy was beginning to have director issues. Behind the scenes, Rogue One was a mess, and it was time to get rid of the current leader on that film. But beyond that, there was the problem of Colin Trevorrow. Now, this is where we get into the debacle with The Last Jedi and Episode 9, which wasn't really known as The Rise of Skywalker back then, so we're just going to call it Episode 9. But this has to do with the mess that happened behind the scenes when it comes to those two movies. Unbeknownst to Star Wars fans and cinema journalists, the story group had been working with Rian Johnson on the big flip of expectations for the current trilogy. Just like fans had been surprised before that Darth Vader was Luke's father, this time the surprise would be that Luke was a failure and Rey was a nobody who would rise to take his place as the hero of the galaxy. Fuck you, Lucasfilm. That's all I'll say. Fuck you, Lucasfilm. While Abrams had worked with Kasdan on the Force Awakens script, Johnson was working with the Lucasfilm story group in a way that not even J.J. Abrams was aware. For weeks, Rian Johnson would meet with Curie Hart's story group behind closed doors, planning out a detour for The Last Jedi. And you can see they even linked the article, the source of the article right here. But back to the director issues. That director issue, the problem was that the director for Episode 9 needed to know what the heck was happening in Episode 8 before he could even get started on formulating ideas. With Abrams and Kasdan blind to what Johnson and the story group was doing, it was Trevorrow who would receive an outline first for The Last Jedi. What he saw shocked him, and immediately he started making calls. I can't make episode 9 without Luke Skywalker. He told them, I have to have Luke Skywalker. The fans are going to go berserk if there's no Luke Skywalker. And which is absolutely 100% correct. The answer back to him from Kerry Hart and Kathleen Kennedy was a resounding no. Of course. He would have to use the current Last Jedi concepts to finish the trilogy. Confused, he reached out to Mark Hamill to gain leverage, but Hamill had zero influence with this group. And Hamill himself was disgusted with his role in Episode 8, which we already knew this. Seriously, you can find multiple videos that are just like undeniable evidence of how Mark Hamill actually feels about Episode 8. So Trevor began working on a different idea, one to essentially resurrect Luke Skywalker, explain the Force Ghost concept, and have all the old Jedi join together to help Rey defeat the Sith forever. And you can see they even remember there was that whole Colin Trevorrow script for Episode 9 got leaked, which I'm not gonna lie was infinitely better than The Rise of Skywalker that we got. It still had its problems, but it would have still been infinitely better than what we got. But upon finding out that Colin Trevorrow wouldn't let Luke Skywalker go, Trevorrow was told it was he who would have to go, of course, because unless you do exactly what we want you to do, despite the fact that what you want to do might actually save our asses, we're still going to let you go. This is the leadership at Lucasfilm at the time. You know, you try to warn them, like, hey, this isn't going to work. Like, I seriously think you need to reconsider this. They never listen. Then came the fall of Lucasfilm with the release of The Last Jedi. While they attempted to steer the narrative online and through influence reviews by Access Media, which again, we all already knew this, the fan reaction was quickly realized. The Last Jedi had not only divided fans, but it had failed financial expectations dramatically. The new talking point was put out that Empire had seen a lower box office haul than A New Hope 2. But that ignored that New Hope was in theaters months and months longer than Empire at a time when theaters often only had 2 screens. It also didn't stop the negative feedback. Quickly, the tides turned on Star Wars and Lucasfilm. Talk of a Rian Johnson trilogy became mostly just Rian Johnson talking about a trilogy. Yeah, the whole Rian Johnson trilogy is not going to happen. The Californian elites of Lucasfilm began to blame the fans. Surely it was the bumpkins in Nebraska, Idaho, and Texas, flyover country that were hating this film, and surely it was only because of chauvinists, Trumpsters, and other deplorable white males. Yeah, of course, that's the only reason for people not to like your film. It can't be that you just made a bad film that they didn't like. No, it had to be because of all this crap. If someone is responding to diversity negatively, fuck them. 95% of my interactions on Twitter are absolutely lovely and constructive and wonderful. That is an absolute fucking lie. With the Star Wars fans, I think the fandom has to take a stand against getting defined by a very small slice of it. Oh, dude, I would love that. I would love if Star Wars fandom wouldn't be defined by a very small slice of the actual fandom, and that it does not represent the lion's share. But the damage was done. While Bob Iger had signed off on The Last Jedi, he immediately recoiled when he saw a reaction to Episode 8. Now, I think this is where we get a little bit of insight into something that we didn't already know. This was different than anything he had seen from Pixar or Marvel. This was mass disgust from consumers. Simultaneously, the director of this film was disparaging the consumers, attacking viewers, etc. While the public presentation of Protecting the Last Jedi by Disney continued, the writing was on the wall behind executive closed doors. As Solo lost its directors fired by Kennedy, Iger's confidence in Kennedy had come to an end. She was scrubbed from his autobiography, and Iger reached out to Jon Favreau to begin writing the ship. Now, this is where we get into that whole whether or not there is indeed a civil war behind Lucasfilm, and there is something that they mention here that I think you might be interested in. Jon Favreau was the best bet Disney had out of anyone they had worked with. He was the one who had gotten the entire Marvel Universe off the ground. While Kevin Feige receives and deserves much of the credit, it was Favreau who created the Marvel blueprint for movies. Favreau was the only director to have successfully created a holiday classic in decades. Favreau was working on new film technology that blew away anything on the market. Now, I don't know if this specifically refers to that whole stagecraft thing that we saw during the investor meeting, but if it is, then yeah, I can see why. In Iger's mind, Favreau was and is the modern-day George Lucas, and while people like Lasseter and even Iger himself were being pulled into the Pound Me Too controversies, Favreau was known in the industry for being ethically outstanding, squeaky clean. In late 2017, Favreau had begun talks to produce a series for Disney Plus based in the Star Wars universe. Iger had arranged for the talks and was ready to back Favreau with a theatrical release level budget in an attempt to give their future streaming service something to get it going. Ignore hokey talking points from Disney about Favreau wanting to randomly do online streaming series about Star Wars westerns. I don't think that was ever going to happen. That's not how things work at the level of a director for blockbusters. Favreau is likely the most respected big budget director in the world. He doesn't ask to lower himself to doing online streaming series unless there's already a very big plan in place. In Iger's opinion, Netflix represented the biggest threat to Disney over time. That is true, and I still think Disney's nowhere near being like a competitor to Netflix and especially Amazon. Like, I think those two are still at the top. I still think Netflix is above them a little bit, but Amazon is definitely going to get close. And if that Lord of the Rings show, which I have no hope of it ever being good based on what I've been hearing, but just in case, if they do it right, if they actually stick to Tolkien's vision, especially with the budget that they have, how much money Amazon is actually putting into it, then boy, oh boy, that show could end up taking over the world, and Amazon will definitely be at the top. Where was I? Oh, and the company was about to focus huge amounts of attention to their online plans. Favreau was placed in contact with Dave Filoni by Kathleen Kennedy. And okay, I just want to talk about this a little bit because I kept seeing this online from all the people who are saying that there is no, war at Lucasfilm, because they always point to a quote from a book that says, Kathleen Kennedy put Favreau and Filoni together, so obviously that means there's no civil war. No, guys, I hate to break it to you, but that proves nothing. Like, okay, yeah, that may have happened at the beginning. That doesn't mean she has anything to do with it now. Like, that literally proves nothing. So can I please just stop seeing this fucking book being used as something to discredit the whole there's no civil war thing? Again, I'm not saying I believe that it is 100% true. But this fucking book proves nothing, so stop saying it proves everything, please. Because it doesn't. Sorry, I had to get that out there because I kept seeing it over and over again, and people acting like it proves something. I'm sorry, again, no disrespect to the people who do, but it doesn't. I'm sorry, it just doesn't. He was a decent enough writer, had worked on some animated series, seemed to know a lot about Star Wars, and didn't rock the boat. Favreau wanted someone who knew Star Wars inside and out, and since he wasn't interested at all in the story group, thank God, Filoni would do. Kennedy was busy with the big stuff, and a series on a streaming service was below her and her attention. Little did she know, Iger and Favreau had cooked up a very big idea. I'm sorry if you keep hearing my phone in the background. But after the public reception failure of The Last Jedi, after the DVD and Blu-ray sales tanked, after Solo's directors were fired, and after Solo became the first ever Star Wars film to lose money, Kathleen Kennedy's reign was over. Yes, she was still the figurehead, and yes, she had a contract extension. However, Bob Iger went to such a degree that he even publicly killed expectations of future Star Wars releases in the near term after the sequel trilogy would conclude. Yeah, if you guys remember, there was that whole the interview that Bob Iger did, where he basically said that we're going to be putting the movies to rest for a bit because apparently there's Star Wars fatigue and all that crap, which was it was bullshit. Like, it was just a bunch of bullshit. You can tell that they at the time had no idea what they were doing. They were pissed that their movies were being lambasted by fans. The fact that they were losing money, they couldn't deal with it. And the Disney's doing what it always does. It tries to get rid of any bad press. However, for Disney, that was unheard of. But Kennedy was allowed to stay on, bitter and mostly powerless, as removing her was deemed too potentially damaging for negative publicity. And unfortunately, here's the thing, if Disney didn't care about negative publicity, Kathleen Kennedy wouldn't still be here. Guys, let's be honest. The only reason she's still there is because they know that if they fired her, as any company would have, at least if they still had common sense, people would there'd be all these bullshit articles saying Disney is apparently against female leadership and whatever, and all that fucking BS. And they just don't want to deal with that. And nobody in Hollywood wanted to take her place after the industry fallout that would result. As toy sales crashed, video game revenue cratered. The Rise of Skywalker barely made half of The Force Awakens box office revenue, and that's with China, by the way. That's with China. They still barely crawled over the 1 billion mark. Disney executives began working with Favreau more and more. Kennedy would help develop some minor Star Wars properties going forward, even while her first original animation series, Resistance, which was fucking awful, it was fucking garbage, was dismally received. Favreau and his Star Wars guru Filoni were given the green light to go big with their series, The Mandalorian. For Burbank, this was the Hail Mary. If The Mandalorian failed, Star Wars was likely to be unpopular for years. If The Mandalorian failed, Disney Plus was likely to limp out of the gate. A rare move was made to give Filoni complete power over The Mandalorian. If this is true, they definitely made the right choice. Kennedy could only provide him with notes. She could not dictate anything about the series. In one set of notes, she recommended going with Boba Fett as the lead character right out of the gate. Favreau overrode. In the midst of all of this, Galaxy's Edge at Disneyland had opened in late May of 2019, whereas Iger had announced to the world that crowds would flock to the expansion without even any advertising. Whereas Disneyland had gone multi-million-dollar renovations to handle the increased crowd sizes, Galaxy's Edge was an incredible flop. I still think it is a flop. Nobody's going to Galaxy's Edge because it sucks. Okay? It sucks. Think about this. They had a Star Wars land and they didn't choose to design it with, Star Wars as the theme. Instead, they made up this planet that nobody ever heard of. They filled it with characters that nobody liked, instead of going with the characters that everyone likes, instead of going with Luke Skywalker, instead of going with Darth Vader, instead of going with the Emperor, instead of going with Ventress, Ahsoka, Han Solo, Leia, like all of these recognizable characters. Instead, they chose to go with Kylo motherfucking Ren. Just fucking brilliant, Disney. Fucking brilliant. Attendance to Disneyland actually dropped. The destruction of Star Wars was complete, and now expectations were that The Mandalorian might fail as well. Yeah, I think I even remember saying that I didn't think The Mandalorian was going to be good. I thought it might be okay at best, and now it's pretty much like it's all any Star Wars fan even talks about. Iger had been embarrassed. Star Wars was a failing franchise, and they had just used up all of Disneyland's free acreage on a development that actually cost them attendance. And you can see they even linked the article right there. And then The Mandalorian launched. On November 12, 2019, The Mandalorian launched on Disney Plus, and it seemed to be successful. In fact, it seems fans liked it. It actually grew in popularity over time. It returned to looking like a Star Wars film from the original trilogy. It was devoid of the flaws of the Kathleen Kennedy Star Wars brand. And best of all, it wasn't just popular, it was selling Disney Plus. People loved the new Baby Yoda character. Toy sales began skyrocketing once manufacturing kicked into high gear for Baby Yoda toys. While Kennedy became embittered over the success of the one Star Wars property she had no control over, her story group had essentially been gutted. In 2019, Carrie Hart fled Lucasfilm as a consultant to Rian Johnson's T Street studio, which has now produced a single success in 2 years. Don't count on them getting a trilogy anytime soon. Yeah, we keep saying this. The Rian Johnson trilogy is not going to happen, including the whole D&D trilogy. By D&D, I mean Dan and Dave, the idiots who destroyed what could have gone down in history as the biggest TV show ever. And now nobody's even talking about it. Seriously, I dare you to tell me when was the last time you ever heard someone bring up Game of Thrones in a conversation. Let me know in the comments. When was the last time you talked to someone and they brought up Game of Thrones? Seriously, let me know in the comments. Kennedy continued to work on more series within Star Wars, but she would have no theatrical releases, and Favreau had complete control over whatever he wanted to do with the brand. His plans involved creating a streaming version of the MCU in which multiple series at cinema quality bring forth an interwoven narrative that culminates in cultural event crescendos. But the ultimate catastrophe for Kennedy came in early 2020, just as the global pandemic was getting ready to strike. Kennedy lost yet another director, this time for her only theatrical release she had in the quiver, Indiana Jones 5. This one was a striking rebuke because it meant that the man who had originally brought her into the fold had abandoned her. Kennedy's first major role had been as Spielberg's assistant on the original Indiana Jones. Now, decades later, she had lost his confidence. James Mangold would be brought on as a replacement, but it would be he who would write the script with input from Harrison Ford. This might not even come out while Kennedy was still under contract with Lucasfilm. Some say there is a civil war at Lucasfilm, others deny it and claim it's all a grandiose lie. In reality, behind the doors of Lucasfilm is a fractured studio of 3 ideological divisions. Okay, this is where we get into what their claims are of what's going on behind Lucasfilm. This is what they say, okay? There are the old-timers who remember the days of George Lucas. They are the apolitical, non-ideological artisans. For those, most have kept their heads down and try to keep themselves from being fired or disparaged by the Kathleen Kennedy crew. The KK crew, on the other hand, are the hires since 2012, the ones who held the keys to the sequel trilogy, but now have been relegated to comic book releases and YA novels. The third group is the Favreau and Filoni bunch. Excuse me. This new group is comprised of Favreau loyalists brought in and generally work outside the confines of Lucasfilm proper. They get to bypass Kennedy and the KK crew, and their budgets come straight from the top of Disney. Where this goes in the future is anybody's guess, and how a company can continue with such stark differences is a wonder. But as best as I know and can tell, that's the story of Lucasfilm in the Kathleen Kennedy era, and I think that is all. Wow, okay, Jesus. I told you guys this is going to be a long article, and especially a long video. Now look, when it comes to their claims as to what's actually going on by Lucasfilm, specifically this part right here, I'm starting to think maybe I could just focus this video on this part right here and save you guys a lot of time, but whatever. I'm hoping I gave you guys some interesting information as to what's going on behind the scenes of Lucasfilm and that little bit of a history lesson. So, what do I think? Do I think there is indeed a divided Lucasfilm? Well, I still don't know because, again, I'm not there. I don't know, so I can't claim that I know for a fact. But at the same time, I can't say with 100% certainty that there is no division in Lucasfilm. Let's say that. Let's use the word division instead of civil war. I can't say with 100% certainty that there is no division. I do think that it is there. Now, whether or not the claims that they made here that, Favreau and Filoni are working to try and, bring Star Wars back and not listen to Kathleen Kennedy and any of her suggestions, I do think that might be true because I think that is their best move forward. I think that right now, if they listen to Kathleen Kennedy and any of her decisions, they are going to kill whatever goodwill that they had right now. And I think we are starting to see some hints that, they're trying to right the ship because if you remember, there was that whole situation with Pablo Hidalgo, and then immediately he deleted the tweet and then from what I remember, they tried to get an apology to Star Wars Theory. Now, the fact that happened proves that they might be actually learning and they might be trying to be better moving forward, or at the very least, not attack fans like they have done in the past. At the very least, we can expect that much because if this was still under Kathleen Kennedy's, guidance, then Pablo Hidalgo wouldn't have deleted that tweet. Because remember, Rian Johnson went ahead and started attacking fans multiple times and never deleted those tweets. In fact, I think in some way he's still doing it and nothing's happening. That goes to show you that maybe things are indeed changing at Lucasfilm. Now, I personally do not think that Kathleen Kennedy has anything to do with that. I think Kathleen Kennedy just does not care about Star Wars. She doesn't care about the fans. All she cares about, if I'm willing to bet, is her own reputation. Like, that's it. I think that's all she genuinely really cares about, which is the same for, a lot of studio executives. They only care about their reputation. They don't really care about, the franchise that they own, or at the very least hiring the best people for it, which is kind of a shame because these are the people in charge of these franchises that we have loved and supported for years. But anyway, guys, I'm going to end this video right here. Seriously, this video is a lot longer than I wanted it to be. So I'm just going to end it right here. And as always, let me know your thoughts in the comment section down below. If you like this video and if you like what I do here, guys, please consider liking. Just head on down, click on the like button, share this video on whatever social media platform you use. And please consider subscribing. And of course, I want to give a thank you to everyone who is subscribed. Thank you so much, you guys. You have no idea how much I appreciate your support, but if you are subscribed, just do me a favor and check to make sure that you are still subscribed, because I know now for a fact that YouTube does indeed unsubscribe people without their notice. So if you've been unsubscribed from my channel or any channel that just do me a favor and make sure to check. And if you do subscribe, click on the bell icon, because that way you will be notified whenever I post a brand new video. That is it, guys. Please remember to stay safe and take care of yourselves, and join me for the next video. Bye for now.